All right, guys, we're gonna get started probably in a minute. Just wanted to say hello. Just wanted to say hello and good afternoon to some and good evening to the rest. My name is Sandra Benoit, and I will be the facilitator for today's webinar, The 360 View of the College Application Process. I am very excited to have everyone join us tonight, so thank you so much for being here. I'm going to share with you a little bit of information on today's agenda. That's the way that we're going to get started today, and an introduction to our panelists. And then we'll get into the thick of it. So let's go ahead and get started. Today's agenda, as mentioned, we'll start off with the introductions. Then we'll go into the panelist discussion. Hopefully we'll be able to get to one or two live questions from the audience. So if you do have any questions, there is a Q&A box below. If you have any lingering questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to put them in the chat. And then last but not least, we will have some fun quick facts at the end. And yeah, so we'll go ahead and get started with the introductions. We'll start off with Brian. I'll just kind of go over them briefly, and then they'll go into who they are and what they do in more detail in a second. Brian Coleman, he's a counselor and adjunct instructor for Jones College Prep. We have Meredith Lombardi, who's the Associate Director of Outreach and Education for CommonApp. And then we have Andrew Palumbo, the VP of Enrollment Management for WPI. So, Brian, why don't you start us off with a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Good afternoon, good evening to all. So I work in Chicago Public Schools at a high school here that I've been at for about 8 years. I'm the counseling department chair. I oversee our school's mentorship program, as well as overseeing our counseling curriculum for seniors. And I partner with others on our programming for freshmen. I'm also former, I guess always, National School Counselor of the Year. I won that award from the American School Counseling Association in 2019. I'm particularly passionate about supporting marginalized student populations, particularly supporting first-generation students as they navigate the post-secondary planning process. I have a whole bit around unicorns. I'm not wearing a unicorn horn today, but I have unicorns all around me in my office. They may come out during our time, just to drive home the point that I do think that we are all special with unique interests and perspectives and experiences to draw upon as we plan for our futures and build the lives that we want. That's enough about me for now. Thank you.
Well, congrats on that win, because that is so amazing. I just want to make sure everyone heard 2019. He was Person of the Year, so we want to celebrate that in all aspects. And then we have Meredith. Can you tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. I'm Meredith Lombardi. I am the Associate Director of Outreach and Education at CommonApp. Hopefully you are familiar. If not, I am here to answer all of your questions about CommonApp, which is a platform you can use to apply to colleges. Right now, we have just under 1,000 schools that are members of CommonApp. And again, we'll get into that. My role at CommonApp is to provide education and training for students, families, and counselors about the application process. Prior to joining CommonApp, actually today is my 6-year anniversary, I was a school counselor myself. And so I worked with DC Public Schools. So welcome anyone from DC at a school there. And I was also a counselor in Georgia, just outside of Atlanta. So really happy to be here.
Thank you for sharing, Meredith. And last but not least, we have Andrew. Andrew, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, first of all, congratulations on that milestone, Meredith. I just passed 6 years at WPI last month, so I'm right there with you. So hi, everybody. I'm Andy Palumbo, a VP for Enrollment Management at Worcester Polytechnic Institute in Worcester, Mass. We are a small, selective, private STEM university that really focuses on collaborative project-based education. And so I'm here to represent not just WPI, but sort of the higher ed university perspective, answer those questions. And I also earlier this year just started a podcast called Inside Admission Podcast, and really has two goals. One is to create more transparency about the college admissions process, and the other is to reduce stress and anxiety for students and parents going through the process. So that's basically our goal here tonight. So I'm excited. This is fun stuff, and you guys have a fantastic panel and me here to answer your questions tonight.
Thank you so much, Andrew, and congratulations on your podcast. I believe you're on episode 3. Awesome.
That's right.
Awesome. So we just got to know a little bit more about our panelists. They're an amazing panelist group that we have here, but we also want to know who we have as our audience. So you'll see a poll come up on your screen. It'll ask you if you're a student, parent, educator, and just go ahead and choose one of those, and we'll be able to see who our audience is, because we're really excited to have you here. So we'll give you a couple seconds to fill that out, and then we'll have the results and we'll be able to share that with everyone. All right, it looks like we have 57% are high school students. So this is really exciting, really, really exciting. And we have parents and some educators on as well. So thank you guys so much for filling that out. We'll go ahead and get started because, well, we'll give you what you want. What you came here is the inside scoop. So we'll go ahead and get started. We'll start with Brian. We'll put you in the hot seat. The first question that we have from our students that we got from the questions that they brought in was, how should students begin the process of finding the right college?
What an interesting question. I think there's so many options available to you, point one, and there really isn't a wrong way to start. When I work with students, I encourage students to think about what they know best themselves. And that starts with the self-reflection. What's important to you? What are your values as pertains to continuing your education? What do you hope to experience in a post-secondary environment? You can start from your career aspirations and work backwards and think about, well, what level of education or types of educational experiences will get me where I want to go. You can start on the front end with your interest areas. I know I'm just really excited about computer science. So I'm really excited about nursing, and I want to learn more about nursing, and start from your interest area and see what educational opportunities will set you up in that direction. I know many students are influenced by their families and their peers in terms of educational experiences they've had, schools that they may have attended. So collect your information, glean from your peers and those important to you, whose opinions you value, what options are available. So that's all the reflection and gathering information. And then I think it's really important to go into your research based on your interests, or based on your values, or based on your career aspirations, or based on the school and opportunities that have been mentioned to you in passing. Let's dig into some research. And there are a lot of different tools that can help you identify school options. In particular, one of the more user-friendly ones that I love recommending to my students is College Board's Big Future. Really enjoy Big Future. It's very user-friendly, and it's easy to filter out based on your interest area, based on where you want to be regionally, or your academic experience, or the selectivity of the institution. A lot of great ways to filter out what you're looking for and come up with the college list. There are also tools and programs and platforms like Naviance that we use in my district. But again, thinking about yourself, reflecting, and then taking your reflections and pushing those into research in a meaningful way.
I love that. I love that you said values and research. I think those are two great things. Now we'll go to Meredith. Meredith, once a student chooses a college, it's a big relief. Then comes the college application process, which it can become overwhelming. Where do you recommend students start?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I really appreciate what you said, Brian, just in terms of the self-reflection and starting there. Because this is a process where you may veer differently than your friends, and that's okay, because you're looking for where you're going to get the right fit and opportunities for you. I think when it comes to applying, there are resources out there as well. So I'll just for example, on Common App, we have something called Common App Ready, which I'll put out there in the chat, which has a document on gathering your materials, right? Like get a copy of your transcript. If you're going to be applying with test scores, have your test scores. Create your account. So you can create your Common App account on commonapp.org, or determine if you are going to be applying through other application platforms if your school is not on the Common App. Those are things that you'll need to know just at the basic. Meet with your school counselor. There are amazing people in your school who are there to help you, and you do not need to wait until you are a senior in high school. At some schools, they may not reach out to you until later, maybe the junior or senior, but that doesn't mean you can't reach out to them anytime. Get to know them as a freshman, and just create those relationships so that when you have questions down the road, you know a person that you'll go to, and that person is going to be writing most likely a letter of recommendation for you. So get to know them early, but start the application by creating your account. Look at the resources that tell you what materials you need. And the earlier you explore it, the stress will be reduced on you, because you'll realize that you can do this. That the system is not designed to trick you. It's just designed for colleges to get to know you better.
I love that. And I love that you said that you don't have to wait until junior and senior year. That's a really big thing that I think can become a misconception, is you have to wait till then, but start as early as you can. I think that's the best thing. So thank you for sharing that, Meredith. And now, Andrew, now that we're going into year 2 of the pandemic, and our idea of providing an education has readjusted to living during COVID times, what has changed to the application process within the last 2 years?
Nothing. Next question. I'm kidding. So a lot has changed, and you can tell by our reactions, certainly a lot has changed. And I'll get to that in a minute. But I think you've just heard some excellent advice from Brian and Meredith. A lot hasn't changed. So there's what's the goal? The goal is to find a college that matches the things that you're interested in. Why do you want to go to college? What matters to you? What do you value? That hasn't changed. You still need to figure that out. You still need to do the research. Really what's changed is how. It's the mechanisms in which you get information, you learn about schools. Thankfully, there are a lot of things that are still standing. The Big Futures website is a great example. If anything, one of the positives has been, a lot of the information is coming to you live through your computer right now. Events like this were far less frequent. I just tweeted something out. You got to see my coworker Moose, if you joined us right at the beginning. My Great Dane sometimes pops in for some comic relief. So, I mean, I think, what's changed? The process has certainly diverted from what we're typically used to. We're typically used to the traditional college fair, the visit at the high school, going to a college campus to visit a school. Some of those things have changed. You can still do some of those things. There certainly are some college fairs that took place this fall. Many high schools were having some, visits on their campus. A lot of colleges have gotten back to maybe different augmented campus tours, but still giving you the information you need and you getting on campus, getting a vibe for the students and the community. That stuff's all important, but there are new tools now. So there's a lot on colleges' websites where you can get on-demand content about academic majors, about student clubs and organizations. And so there's more information, which can be good, but it can also be overwhelming. And so one of the things that's important is, parceling out your time, figuring out how you're going to approach this. But I don't think it's necessarily harder. It's different. And so there have been some great steps along the way where admissions offices, we are figuring out how to review transcripts that look totally different from what they used to look like from your high schools because of disruptions. And we're coordinating with Brian and with countless other folks like him. The Common application proactively added a place for students to talk about disruptions or just information you want to share about COVID or other sort of life events that's important contextual information. And that's the piece I'll end with, context. It's always been important when college admissions officers review materials. We're not just looking at a score. We're not just looking at a GPA. We're looking at everything you've provided and trying to contextualize it within the opportunities that you've had in your school and in your life. And certainly everyone's lives have been far different than we probably expected 2 years ago. And so it's just our job to figure out how to contextualize that. And the more information we have tends to be the better. But if you don't have something to share, if it's just, like you feel like you're well represented by the information you put in the Common application, by all means, that's fine too.
I think you just let everybody breathe a little easier right now hearing that. So I appreciate that, Andrew. I'll take it back to Brian. Since students, a lot of students are asking if they're unsure about what they want to do in the future and what career to choose, what should they do? How should they decide what school to attend? Like during high school, these are big questions. What are your recommendations?
Yeah, I mean, my first recommendation is to normalize that uncertainty, that it is totally okay to not know, that you don't have to have it all figured out legitimately. And so many students will get into college and they may change their major a few times, which I think is an important note for everyone to be aware of. So I recommend looking at colleges and universities that are going to give you the most flexibility to explore your interest areas. If you're applying to a school, for example, where you may be applying directly into the School of Engineering, but you know that your interests are between engineering and maybe music, okay, well, that might be tough for you. So finding schools that are going to give you the opportunity to float. Many schools have the opportunity to declare undecided coming in. Different schools have different timelines by which you need to declare a major. So I think it's really important for you to know for the schools that you're interested in, like what flexibility do they offer in terms of you making a decision around your major or not? And how might that impact whether or not you wish to apply? But taking a pause and recognizing that you may not know, it's totally okay to float between majors. Just make sure that you're applying to schools that give you the options to do so. The biggest thing I tell students, I would hate for you to land at that institution, land in that major program, and not have the flexibility and feel trapped. So be very aware of what options exist. And that's why I think it's very important. I know Andrew spoke about the visits with admissions representatives and college representatives. I think those meetings are so incredibly important for students to participate in, to ask these questions. You know what if I'm not sure? Like, do I have options? Could I potentially declare a major and switch later? Like, making sure I come back to research, gathering all of that information, making sure you're doing your due diligence when it comes to your research so that you can make informed decisions around which institutions are going to have the most options and flexibility for you later.
With options and flexibility, the next big worry I think students have and that they mentioned was money. So Meredith, I throw this question to you. We always want to ensure students are paying the least amount of money out of pocket as possible. What is the best way for students to navigate the scholarship application process or scholarship applications in general?
Yeah. And I also just want to kind of follow up on Brian's point about the normalizing the change in college major choice. Talk to your parents and your friends' parents about whether they changed majors in college, because I can tell you that I did that. I don't know if Andy or Brian, so I know Sandra, I don't know about you, but I picked a school. I thought I was going to go into that major. First class I took in that major was not the right fit. So finding a college is more than the major. I'll also just say that I worked as an academic advisor at a university where I supported students with the changing of majors. And so if you don't get into your major of choice, it doesn't mean that you can't still go to the school you want to go to, because there's still opportunities for you to potentially change your major when you get there. As far as scholarships, we should have a whole separate webinar on that. Sandra, so maybe that's your next one. because financing your education is a big deal. And we know from students that you are thinking about it at the time you're also thinking about where to go to college. There are tools out there to help demystify the cost. Any of us will tell you that do not be tricked by sticker price of a college. What you see on their website is not the cost that you will pay. It really is up to your individual family circumstances. So number one is going to be make sure you file the FAFSA. That's good. Your best way to get free money from the government. So do the FAFSA. You'll do that in your senior year of high school and every year that you are in college. Myths, demystifying things. You don't have to wait until senior year to apply for scholarships. That's why it's so important, like RaiseMe, right? Where you can start earlier in the process. You can find scholarships and start banking money prior to being a senior in high school. Talk to your school counselor. Lots of schools have scholarship listings. If your system uses something like Naviance, there's listings of scholarships there. Scholarships are not just, again, for seniors. Look at financial aid pages of colleges, or ask when representatives come to your high school, what kind of scholarships do you offer? Because after the government, there's lots of scholarships that are offered directly from colleges. You just kind of need to know how to find them and do that research. So part of that goes back to Brian's original point about research as well. When you're doing research on colleges, you should also do research on the types of scholarships that they're offering. And then as far as the application, you're going to find out that it's pretty similar to the college application process. They're going to want to know personal information. They're going to want to know that context that Andy talked about. They're going to want an essay, most likely, and some letters of recommendation. And what's nice about CommonApp is that we've actually done some partnering with scholarships. So we help you connect with College Board scholarships through your CommonApp account. We have the Jack Kent Cooke Foundation Scholarship on our platform. And we also have a partnership with Scholarship America to help identify students for scholarships. So just some places to start.
Meredith, I just did want to piggyback off of you and Brian. The flexibility, I personally went to the U of A and the University of Arizona, and I majored in business and then got really excited about a retail and consumer science building department that they built. So I ended up, thankfully I had a scholarship, but I ended up doing both. So I majored in both. So the flexibility of the business degree or the business classes was able to transfer some of the courses to the other degree. So it was really nice that they were flexible in that area and they saw where it connected. And that was really nice. And that was probably one of the best things that I could say. I got to get the best of both worlds. So that's really nice when you can do that. And I got my scholarship when I was a sophomore. So that sophomore scholarship lasted 2 years. I took community college and then went into the university. So I was very lucky. And so you can get scholarships at any time in your high school career, also on RaiseMe, just a little hint right there. So we'll go to Andrew. Andrew, let me see. We have your question right here. Since we're on the topic of scholarships, we know that standardized testing has played a significant role in attaining some scholarships. But some schools are going test optional or test blind due to COVID. How important are standardized tests now?
Yeah, so this is one of my favorite questions because I think it's one that's on everyone's minds. And so first of all, let me start with what standardized test scores aren't. They are not some type of mythical equalizer that allows colleges to line up students, from 1 to 1,600 and put you in rank order. That's just not what they are. Standardized test scores actually have some pretty long-standing problematic correlations with family income and wealth, race and ethnicity, and gender. So, I mean, I always find this one fascinating. I believe in every state in the country, but certainly in the US at large, certainly in my state and the states I've worked in before, Massachusetts, New York, New Hampshire, every single year of the SAT, every single section. So, you know, all the different iterations of the new SAT, the new SAT, the new SAT, or whatever they're calling it nowadays, men have always outscored women. Brian, you work with high school students. Is that what we see in the classroom?
Nah.
So, you know, it's just a simple example, but to let you know that, like, you should be taking these tests with a grain of salt. You know, I will tell you one truth that I think speaks for almost every single university in the country. You are probably more concerned with your test score than we are. And so I think if you take something away from our conversation today, hopefully it's being less stressed about the process, but specifically, hopefully you're less stressed about these test scores. It's 4 hours on a Saturday morning versus 4 years of your academic challenges, triumphs, achievements. And so for us, that's way more data. It's way more compelling, and it correlates much better to how students will do in college. But outside of academics, a huge part of a college education is the full experience. So the co-curricular and extracurricular activities. And so we want to know who you are as a person. What are the things that matter to you? And that's why the Common Application has additional information that it seeks to get from you. That's why we look for an essay and recommendations. And, you know, we want to know about the things that you participate in. The thing is, no one thing is going to get you into a college. And I think, you know, every year you see the essay that got this student into every Ivy League school. That's just not how it works. Standardized test scores, not how it works. And so when it comes to scholarships, that's where it gets a little tricky. So over the past 2 years, we've seen a huge shift toward test optional and test blind or test free schools that don't consider test scores. Now, before the pandemic, over 1,000 schools already were test optional. And so those schools said, send your scores, don't send your scores. We want you to decide what's the best representation. And a lot of them, it's because that these test scores add little to no additional predictive value. And we also know they're a huge stressor for students, and they have those problematic correlations that I spoke with. That's something we can't ignore now that we know it, we have the data to prove it. And so, you know, they've been de-emphasized across higher ed. However, you know, the pandemic really forced a lot more schools, about, you know, 600, 700 more schools adopted sort of emergency test optional policies. And so this is where it gets a little bit tricky. You do have to ask your schools, once you get to that point of application, ask them how they're using test scores in admissions, but also in financial aid. You know, what we've seen is that schools tend to get the admissions part right first, and the financial aid part sometimes lags. And so you might find that scholarships are still considered in some merit scholarships, or scores are still considered in some merit scholarships. That's not cool. It shouldn't be the case. Unfortunately, it is. And I'm seeing more and more of my colleagues move away from that, but it's an important question to ask. And unfortunately, that's one of the things that's changed about COVID is that these policies have gotten a little bit more confusing. While test optional, I think, is ultimately a very good thing for students, there's a range of different executions of that. And so every school is going to do it a little bit differently. And you'll see some of those early adopters are very different from some of the folks that had to really quickly adopt test optional, who probably are almost certainly are still trying to do the right thing, but they just don't have as much experience with it. And so they're figuring out these policies on the fly. But you've seen schools like Harvard make, you know, the case that that's a school, it's located in Massachusetts. I don't know if anyone's heard of it, but they made an announcement that they were going to, for multiple years, go optional. And so I think that you're going to see more and more schools making that decision as they continue sort of kicking it out. My institution, WPI, is one of almost 100 schools now that have gone test blind or test free. We will not look at test scores. I mentioned that problematic correlation. For us, that is a problem. You know, we care about diversifying STEM. That is core to who we are. We want to provide a more diverse learning and working experience. And so we also know that better outcomes come from more diverse student bodies. And so it's to the benefit of all students to do this. And so for us, we won't look at those scores for admissions, for financial aid. You send them in, we will put them in a dark room somewhere, not to be looked at. And so, that's something that's new. And you see a lot of schools, I think Caltech is still test blind. The entire University of California system is test blind. I believe the CSUs are test blind. And so you're seeing this groundswell, and it's sort of a moment in higher ed where the test scores, the SAT and the ACT have never been this weak in the process. And so what you should take from that is, if you're trying to decide between the SAT and the ACT, taking it a second time, a third time, and something else, I don't really care what the something else is. Do the something else. And that, I'm not saying don't take the test at all, but don't stress about it like students have had to in the past. This is a real moment to take advantage of. And if you're more worried about your grades slipping or hanging out with your friends before you go off to college, focus on those things that you're going to get the most value and the most meaning from.
Thank you so much for that answer. I think it was so detailed and so important for students to hear. I do have a couple questions on the chat. I think Meredith has a couple answered. Let's see, which one is there that I can bring up for everybody if they have some insight that they could share with the attendees. Is applying to college with an associate's degree right out of high school easier than it would be normally, since you're technically transferring? Would it be easier to receive a scholarship since the college will see that the student is capable? And I'll throw that out to anybody.
So I'll jump in here. So I think one of the dirty secrets about college scholarships, and I'm going to give it to you here straight, is that there's this idea of this meritocracy, that again, that we can rank students on some type of continuum, and these students are, better than these students. And so these students are going to get a little bit more money than these students. Just not how it goes. So colleges have to decide what they're going to incentivize. Your merit, if you want to talk about meritorious, like that's being admitted. That's a school saying, wow, we want you. Like, we absolutely want you. The money tends to be a little bit more self-serving for the universities. It's really about the institutional priorities that these universities have. And so in many cases, that's going to be strong academic profile. Sure, that's our main goal. But some schools give away, D1, D2, give away athletic scholarships. Other schools give away music and art scholarships. And so, it's important for you to understand that this idea of merit is really sort of to use a phrase that's somewhat popular now, malarkey. It's kind of, Brian doesn't think it's that popular. Balderdash? No, I've got to work on these. But the bottom line is that, scholarship schools are going to set their own scholarship criteria. And so when it comes to, having an associate's degree, that may be of real value to some schools. It may not be as important or a part of the formula at all for other schools. The other piece I'll mention about students coming out of high school with an associate's degree, very often this is done through dual enrollment, through state programs. Very often within the state, there are agreements that all of the state universities or specific state universities will accept these classes as credit. Sometimes schools out of state, public and private, will not accept these as credit. And so that's something that unfortunately, it really depends on every school, the credits that they'll accept or not accept. Some schools will not accept a college course taught in the high school environment. They'll only accept college courses taught online by college professors or on the college campus. Every school is going to be different. And that is a really unfortunate part of this process, is that, but it's a great reason to narrow your list down to the right number of schools for yourself. Because if you have 30 schools, you're gonna have to do this for 30 schools, figure out their admissions criteria and deadlines, their scholarship criteria and deadlines. And so get the right size list for yourself. Make sure that every school on that list is one you want to go to, and try to get as much information you can about specifically if you're trying to transfer credit in, exactly what will transfer in. Schools should be able to tell you that within a reasonable amount of time.
Thank you so much for answering that one, Andrew. I'll start back with Brian to piggyback off of your first question about being unsure of what college to attend. What do you recommend for students who are trying to pick a major? How do you make your decision, and how did you make your decision? And what recommendations would you have for students who are going through that same process?
Well, I wasn't ready for you to ask me how I made my decision. Hold on. Plot twist. Before there are a few things I want to piggyback on. One part of our goal today is around anxiety reduction. So going back to standardized testing, I just think it's really important for folks to be aware of the test optional schools. Use resources like Fair Test, if you're familiar. Take a look at what options are available to you for schools that are test blind or test optional. And also, if it will make you feel better, and for practical reasons, I think it's a good idea for all students to have at least one sitting of the SAT and ACT under your belts. So you've done it, you have a sense of what the tests look like, if either of the tests speaks to you and your skill sets, and you have a score if and when, such as Andrew was talking about, when it comes to some of the merit-based scholarships, those scores may be needed later. So just to have, again, I always come from a place of making sure you have the most options and then whittling down as needed given your circumstances. And then going back a little bit further to financial aid, I think it's really important before you get into scholarship land to really think about how much money do I need? Financial aid broadly is about need. How much money, not how much money do you want towards your education, does your family want, but what does your family need based on your family's financial situation? And I think taking a look at net price calculators, schools' net price calculators, taking a look at the EFCs, looking at family contribution, just having a clear sense of, all right, based on our financial situation right now, right, or as you're entering the application or in the application process, what is the gap? What's the difference between the amount of money that we could potentially get from the school and the school cost? Is there a gap at all? And that helps you better assess what scholarships do you need to be going for and what amount. I know that the students that I work with, when they get into the thick of the application process, they're overwhelmed with the idea of scholarships. Well, I'll apply for everything and I need all the things. No. Let's get some research. Let's get some concrete information on specifically based on the estimates that you get or based on the FAFSA or the CS profile. Make sure you have a sense of what do I need? And that helps you better target your time and energy towards the amount that you will need to afford those institutions. So going back there. Now, back to me and my process, deciding a major, okay? I obviously love school counseling. I love education. Education is super important to me. 20 years ago when I was trying to figure all this out, I very much wanted to be an actor and I loved finance, right? Those were my two big interests. So I thought about a school that would give me the opportunity to explore both. And then I got to the school and I really decided, you know what, finance, but theater, though, yes. And actually, what about sociology and psychology? I'm super interested. So I think it's really important to think about, well, what are you interested in? Like your variety of interests. And again, coming back to what I said earlier, what opportunities are schools going to give you, right? Do you have to lock in? I know for me, I had to lock into a school at my institution. I worked at and went to Northwestern University in the Midwest for undergrad. Loved it. Locked in theater, had a wonderful experience in theater. I also loved that theater gave me the opportunity to double major across the institution. So I double majored in sociology because learning about patterns of human behavior really spoke to me. Really opened my eyes to politics around oppression and systems of oppression and equity. Really, I learned a lot about standardized testing during that time in my educational experience, not ironically. So it's really coming back to what's important to you? What options do you have? What flexibility do you have? Going back to the idea of transfer, will I be able to transfer in and out of schools? I know Meredith mentioned, if you go into a school, can you switch later once you're at that school? Different schools have different policies. And I'm listening to all of us talk on this call and I'm like, wow, this is so complicated. And there's so many different facets and caveats. So I think more than anything, I really recommend you have a sense of what are the questions? right? The answers you may not have and may be difficult, and they're going to vary from school to school, but what questions do you have? And I always come back to what options exist for me, what major areas are going to set me up for the careers that I'm interested in, what major areas give me the most flexibility in terms of what I want to do. Because again, you don't have to have what you want to do figured out, right? Start with your interest. Interest, broadest net, right? Cast the broadest net that's going to give you the most flexibility and options later. Exeunt.
Thank you so much for that. I think we have so many questions pouring in right now. I'll have Meredith. We have your question that I have loaded from the questions from before, but there's so many questions right here that you have going on. If you wanted to speak to any of these right now, I would love that.
Yeah, I've seen in the chat lots of Common App questions, which I love. It's great that you guys are putting them in there. Please feel free to continue adding them. Again, I'm here, we're all here to demystify this process for you. So first thing I would say is you do not have to wait to be a senior to create your Common App account. We have a feature called account rollover, which means we will roll your information over from year to year. The application itself launches for a specific cycle on August 1st. So generally speaking, for those of you who are, let's say juniors, right? You can create your account now, and then you wouldn't submit it until after August 1st of your senior year. The cycle tends to be, there are different admission plans, which, Andy, maybe you want to talk about that. But some colleges will start to have deadlines starting in October, but generally November, December, January of senior year. But don't be alarmed in terms of early deadline dates, because majority of schools still have deadlines and are open for submitting into the spring of senior year. So you don't have to feel the stress that you have to get your applications in right away senior year. So I saw a question from a junior. Hey, I already have a SAT score. Can I submit my application now? The answer is no. You submit in the year leading up to when you plan to attend. So you can certainly use your SAT score from junior year, but you won't actually be able to submit through Common App until you're in your senior year. Can you create your account now? Yes. CommonApp.org, create your account. It's going to say, like, are you planning to enroll this fall or next year? And based on that, you'll have your account. But either way, you're exploring it. And then again, on August 1st, we'll just carry over the information that you put in your account already. If you added 5 colleges, we'll say, hey, do you still want to carry those 5 colleges over? So you can start filling out some of your demographic information. You can start filling out the high school you attend. If you've taken any dual enrollment courses, you can start working on your activities section. Again, Brian, you should totally weigh in, because it's really hard as a senior to look back on what have I done the last 3.5 years of my high school career. When did I start in this club? Or, and then you're asked questions like, how many hours per week and how many weeks per year? So the earlier you start that, whether it's in Common App or in a spreadsheet or in another tool, the easier it will be for you to go through this process. I saw a question about the essay. Again, if you're a junior, start that now. Some schools in your English classes, you may be working on essays. At Common App, we usually announce if we're going to make any adjustments to the essay prompts in the spring of when you might be a junior. So we plan to make those announcements in the next month. So you'll know that whether we're have any updates or not. There are 7 different prompts you can choose from in the Common App. So you can start that now. You can definitely do it over the summer. You do not have to wait until after August 1st. What else? What other questions were there? Common App essay. Oh, 10th grader. I know I've talked about juniors, but yes, If you're in 10th grade, 9th grade, you can create an account and you can just roll it over every year.
I think you pretty much answered my question without me asking it, which was perfect. So Meredith, thank you so much. I know a lot of kids seem to be interested in the Common App. So she's a great wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much, Meredith, for sharing that. And now we have one juicy question left for Andrew, and it's the big question that I'm sure a lot of students want to know, which is, when you review applications, what exactly catches your eye, or what are you looking for? Can you share more on this?
Yeah, so one thing you'll hear from college admissions professionals as you go through this process, especially panels like this, you'll hear two words: it depends. It really depends on the school, what they value, what they're looking for, but there's way more in common than there is different from school to school. And so first and foremost, at every college and university that I'm aware of, we care most about your high school performance. And in some schools, that may be GPA. For many of us, it's much more than that. It's really the high school transcript itself. There's a lot more information than a single number. We have often, if you think about your courses as 20 to 30 different time-bound, subjective measurements of your success in a specific class, that starts to tell a story. Even though grading is subjective, it starts to show a pattern. So other things we look for on the transcript are the level of appropriate rigor that students are taking. So are you challenging yourself appropriately? Not challenging yourself, taking the hardest classes, loading up on IEPs just to do so. We don't want to see you floundering. We don't want to see you, biting off more than you can chew, or taking on less than we think you're capable of. We really want you to be making the right decisions for yourself. One of the biggest mistakes you can make is looking at your course selection in sophomore, junior, senior year as you approach it and think, what would college XYZ want to see? That's not what that's about. And it shouldn't be. It should really be about what is right for you. Working with Brian or whoever your school counselor is, making the right choices. Never be afraid to challenge yourself. When we see a transcript where a student has challenged themselves, didn't achieve at the same level that they achieved elsewhere, but then they recalibrate and bounce back, we love seeing that, because that says here's a student who's gonna grow, but who knows themselves and is going to be successful. Because one of the biggest transitions from high school to college is you have so many supports in high school. And if you're going to a residential college experience like WPI, you likely have many supports in your home as well. And all of a sudden, when you transition to that college, a lot of those supports go away. Sure, colleges will add more, but this is a big part of the transition: is time management, is accountability, is decision making. And so these are the things that trip students up, not the challenge of the academics, but everything else that goes along with it. And so it's a major life transition. For us, it's helpful to know that, hey, here's a student who really knows themselves. They've made some smart choices along the way. They're really strong in these classes, and they've challenged themselves. And they've seen they're maybe not as strong in these courses, and they've taken an appropriate level. And so, we're not looking for perfection. I think that's important for people to know. Another thing we look at on the transcript is grade trends. If a student has hit a snag, if you think you're alone because sophomore year or junior year, you went remote, or you got COVID, or, something else happened, ACL surgery, mono, you're probably the fifth application I've read that day that had a similar situation. It's all about the context. And so I'll say that again, it's about us understanding if there's some life event, or if there just was a really hard year and you bounce back, or if maybe you're having the hard year now, but you're explaining it to us and we have a record to fall back on. I think that so much of what we do is bound up in that transcript, and schools will often share with us a school profile, which gives us some of the context. It helps us decode what that transcript means for your specific school. And so we're reviewing you within the context of your school. and the offerings that you had. If your school doesn't have AP courses, we don't expect to see AP courses. If your school doesn't have dual enrollment with colleges, we don't expect you to go off to the local community college. You can, but you should be doing that for you, not for colleges. And so transcript, that's numbers 1 through 3, the most important things in the process. Everything else really is contextual, with the rare exception of some schools that will have some types of if not cutoffs, expectations for certain GPAs and SAT scores. That is less and less prevalent. Where we do see that being more prevalent is in some larger schools, like in the Midwest, where we have something called auto acceptance or automatic admission, for students who reach a certain criteria, and that's a great thing. But typically there's not like a cutoff where like, we won't even look at you. And that's not the spirit of college admissions. Ultimately, a lot of the work happens way before you ever submit the application. It's the research that Brian's talked about. It's knowing who you are, what's important to you, and what are the right matches for you. If you've got a list full of matches, you're going to have some difficult decisions to make in the spring, because you're going to get accepted to places that want students just like you, that want you on their campus, or that want you in their classrooms. And so that really should be what the focus is if you do that work ahead of time, right, you're probably going to have some great choices. And the school, yeah, I do it every year. I have to decline some amazing students who I know will go off to another school and excel. It's the worst part about my job. And so many of them, it will be the best thing that ever happens to them, because they will be where they need to be. And here's a secret: there are so many schools that are right for every one of you. And so don't get locked into the idea that there's just this one school. Early decision is an option. My school has it. We really recommend against it. Unless you know this school inside and out, why give up your ability to make a decision? Every single panelist here raised their hand when we talked about changing your major. So what you think you know in the fall of your senior year might not be what you know in the spring of your senior year. And that's so true for so many students each year. And so it really comes down to research. College admissions offices, there's no magic thing we're looking for, but most important is the academics. And then everything else sort of falls behind that and helps to paint a picture of who a student is, what matters to them, how they carry themselves. But none of that is like a make or break. There's no magic essay that will get you into college.
Thank you so much for that. I think one of the big things that I heard you mention is you have a school profile. So it allows students to realize, like, okay, this is within this context. I think sometimes students get a little nervous because they think in a huge context, I'm one in a million, but it's a really small pool because you get to see that school profile, which is really, really nice. A lot of the things that I saw or heard, excuse me, I didn't see them, but a lot of the things that I heard pop up are ask questions, check in with your values, what motivates you, context, and research. There's so many more questions that are in the Q&A chat. Believe me, we hear you. We know that your questions are there. We're going to respond to them either by social media or in one of our follow-up emails. So don't worry. We're going to make sure to answer your questions. Right now, I am going to share with you some quick facts. So let me just go back to my screen right here. And as I say this, just another round for our panelists who just completely went above and beyond with answering those questions. So I'm going to show their picture just one more time so you can see them and remember them. If you do want to contact with any of them, I will put up my email and I can make sure they get any information that you would like to share with them. Discussion questions. So some quick facts. These are just a little bit of quick facts from the questions that you had when you did submit them at the beginning when you registered. Micro scholarships are available as early as 9th grade through RaiseMe. RaiseMe students earn on average $28,000 in scholarships or more. So that's always such a beautiful thing as long as you're putting in all of your extracurricular activities and your school classes into RaiseMe. There's around 6.1 billion on average in scholarships available every year. A lot of it goes untapped. So make sure you're getting into looking into scholarships and just getting your piece of the pie. And then financial aid is open October 1st through June 30th. So a lot of people on the call, a lot of panelists mentioned financial aid. So you still have the opportunity to get financial aid or sign up for financial aid. And attending universities can cost from as little as $5,000 a year to as much as $75,000 a year. A big thing to consider, and something that was mentioned on the call as well, is in-state versus out-of-state and the classes that can be transferred, and if you are taking dual enrollment at the moment. So all we're doing is talking about financial fitness and college application process. So at RaiseMe, we do have a college fitness quiz to help you answer questions that you might have about just financial fitness and how to, what you know about going into the university prospects and learning more about how we were talking about getting money, what you need versus what you want. We do have this QR code right here. So for people new to RaiseMe, you can click on this QR code and stay on the home page, and from there, you'll click on this link that I'll show on the next one, or the QR code, so that you can fill out this financial fitness quiz. This financial fitness quiz is this QR code right here. The financial fitness quiz is going to help you understand a little bit more about what it is that you might need more help learning or getting more research on that we can send your way. So really good resources. We want to send them your way as soon as we can. With this quiz, we'll be able to understand what to send you. So if you'd like to fill that out, you're more than welcome to do the survey. I'll leave it on here for a couple seconds if you want to scan the QR code. And now I'll go to the next page. So with everyone, I just want to say thank you to the panelists. Thank you guys so much for giving us your time tonight. I know it's a little late on the East Coast and all of you guys are on East Coast time, so I appreciate it. I'm sure our students appreciate it, the parents appreciate it, and I want to thank all of the attendees for taking the time to listen to the panel and hear what we have to say. Do you guys have anything that you would want to say as final words?
I'll say something. So there's so much focus on the decision that I make. There are three major decisions in the process. All right. So there is, the schools you're going to apply to. There's my decision. And then there's the school you're ultimately going to choose. You own the two biggest decisions there. And so the most important thing you can do in this process is not to spend much time focusing on the things you can't control. The more time you focus on the things you can control and you put your energy and efforts into that, the less stressful this process will be and the more autonomy you'll feel in the process. And so I know that's hard. I know very often that's the bulk of where'd you get in? Where'd you get in? Try to fight back against that. And for the parents on the call, please don't make that every conversation. Find the time to schedule and have that conversation, but really try to enjoy those final months before life changes and before college becomes a reality. So I'll stop there.
Small plug. Leverage the support available in your school, right? If you've got counselors available, absolutely. I hope you do, and advocate for counselor presence in your institutions, but absolutely, that's what we're here for. This is a big part, helping you navigate a complex process, answering questions, understanding not only the post-secondary planning pieces, but the academic components and the social emotional pieces of what is a very exciting and difficult and anxiety-inducing process. You have supports and resources available to you, so feel free to reach out. And I really want to echo what I'm hearing about the decision process. It's less about what's going to work for, do you work for that college or institution, but what's going to work for you, and never lose sight of what's going to make sense for you. That really brings you back to that realm of influence control. Good luck, rooting for all of you.
Yeah, and I'll just end with remember that this process is about you. It's not about selling yourself. It's not about trying to be something other than your authentic and true self in this process. So write from who you are individually, do the research from who you are individually, make your decisions from who you are individually, and you're going to end up in a great place. Don't worry, like Andy said, about one school rejecting you. You're going to end up somewhere great. You are that unicorn that Brian talks about. You all have a wonderful story to share. There's the unicorn. I love it. Super excited for all of you. Maybe we'll see you on another webinar. We're here as resources. You have lots of resources. Don't be afraid to ask questions.
Thank you guys. And I hope everyone has a good night. I appreciate everybody and see you soon. Bye.
Bye, everyone.